Okay, fantastic. So yeah, as mentioned, during this short session, I'm going to be quickly sharing why it's important to spend time checking on the completeness of OpenStreetMap in a disaster context. And then I'm going to be walking through how you can use automated methods. What I'm really talking about is using Disaster Ninja, which is a website, to check on OpenStreetMap completeness. And then we're going to drill down a bit further into the detail and actually look at OpenStreetMap data and compare it to widely available satellite imagery to check on completeness manually, visually checking completeness of OpenStreetMap manually. Why is it important to check on the completeness of OpenStreetMap? Well, it allows us to answer a really important question that should really be posed early on when considering a disaster response. Both after, as soon as the disaster struck, so let's say once a cyclone has made landfall, but also ahead of a disaster, it can be good to do this. So if you can see the predicted path of, for example, a cyclone, and it looks to intersect with an island or a piece of coastline, good to do this ahead of time as well. It doesn't hurt to be prepared and to check this kind of thing. The question that it allows us to answer partially is it worth carrying out coordinated remote mapping in this region, in this potentially affected or in this affected region? Sometimes, actually quite often and increasingly, since OpenStreetMap has become more and more complete, the answer to that question can be no, it's actually not worth us pushing ahead with coordinated remote mapping using a tool like Tasking Manager, because the area is already pretty well mapped. So here's an example on the right-hand side. This is actually Mayotte, French overseas territory. This is actually very well mapped because it was recently mapped on Tasking Manager because of the cyclone that just hit it. You can see, comparing the aerial imagery to OpenStreetMap, there's a lot of data on OpenStreetMap. It's very well mapped. The roads are there, the buildings are there. Even when the buildings are tightly clustered together, they're very well mapped, individually mapped, and even forms of land use are mapped there. So this is very complete. So I just clicked on the image and it just took me directly to where that is on OpenStreetMap. I'll share these slides afterwards so you can explore those areas. And by just clicking on the image, it will take you to that area on OpenStreetMap. Here's an example of where if you were to check the completeness of OpenStreetMap manually, and you were to see an example like this, the answer to the question would probably be, this area probably does need mapping, right? There's very few buildings that have been mapped here. Only a road or two have been mapped, so it's lacking data. Okay, so if this area was affected by a disaster, or predicted to be affected by a disaster, the answer to this question would probably be yes, it does need mapping. It does need a coordinated response. So that's enough other kind of theory. I'm going to jump into demo now, demo mode. So I'm going to be demonstrating this right on my screen. Okay. I'm taking a very recent disaster, Cyclone Condé 25, which just passed through southern Madagascar. The first tool I'm going to jump to, it's a website. It's called Disaster Ninja. Okay, we're very lucky to have at least one, I think a couple people from Contour on the call today who've created Disaster Ninja and maintain it. So Disaster Ninja is a great tool because you don't need to download or install anything. It's just directly in a web browser that you can open it. I'll drop a link in the chat to Disaster Ninja. When you actually launch Disaster Ninja, and sorry, quick primer on it, Disaster Ninja allows you to do a lot, but one of the key things that it allows us to do is it allows us to look at a disaster area and check quickly the completeness of OpenStreetMap for that area. And I'll show you how that works in a second. When you actually launch Disaster Ninja, it's going to take you to the most recent disaster. It's going to jump to an area of the world. So this is a world map, although it's very zoomed in. By default, what we're seeing with Disaster Ninja is a colored grid, and that grid by default shows population density, where red areas are densely populated and green areas are less densely populated. I'm going to zoom over or drag over to southern Madagascar because I want to now look at Cyclone Honda 25. So I'm going to zoom into this area, and there's a panel. Let's go zoom in a bit, make this text a bit larger for you. There's a panel in the bottom left-hand corner here, which is disasters. It's a list of disasters. Once you've zoomed into the area you're interested in, you can actually select filter by map view, and that's going to show you recent disasters in the area that's in your map view. Okay, there's various ways of looking for disasters, the relevant disasters on this platform, but this is just one way of doing it. When I select that, it's going to just work for a second. It's going to present me with the relevant disasters that have occurred in this area. So here we've got Cyclone Honda 25. That's the one I'm interested in. Just of note, actually, there's also Cyclone Garance 25. That's another one that a size up was done for because it just passed through Reunion, which is over here. That's why it's showing that as well. But the one we're interested in is Cyclone Honda 25. So I'm going to click on that. And as soon as I do that, that's going to show me the track that the cyclone took. Okay. And we can see it's going west to east because like it expands over here, it widens over here. So it originated here off the coast and passed through southern Madagascar. The eye of the storm didn't pass through southern Madagascar, but these kind of most affected areas did intersect it. Okay. Now, the question we might be asking here is, where we can see the cyclone passing through these regions of Madagascar, what's the state of OpenStreetMap like in those regions already? So let's zoom in. Now, as I mentioned, the kind of what we're seeing here by default is a color grid which is showing us the population density. Now, the population density is kind of useful, right? You can zoom in and at a glance, you can get kind of a bit of an insight as to how built up these areas are. So what we can see is that these areas aren't that built up actually, but that some of the coastal areas, like over here, have a slightly higher population density. But you can see there's lots of white areas. White means there's zero predicted population in those areas. And then kind of it goes through green and all the way to red, with red being densest. Okay. So the population densities here are pretty low. Maybe I'm looking here at the west coast because this is kind of where the cyclone hit first, and maybe I'm also looking like in this darkest polygon because this is the path of the cyclone that was maybe most affected. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of concentrate on adjusting the layers that are available to view on the right hand side here. The layers in Disaster Ninja are super powerful. You can do a lot with them. You can turn layers on and off. So for example, there is kind of a cool layer which shows you top contributors in an area. So that's why I'm seeing this username here, Private Marjorie. Private Marjorie is a big OpenStreetMap contributor and local mapper in Madagascar. Like if you want to turn that off, if that's cluttering your view, you can just disable that. Okay. So you just can click on it and it will get rid of that. Now, if we keep scrolling down, the really powerful layers that we can visualize here are contour and analytics. Okay. And you'll see the top two here, which are not enabled, are OpenStreetMap building completeness and OpenStreetMap road completeness. So the first is a prediction of the level of completeness of buildings on OpenStreetMap, and the second is a prediction of the level of completeness of roads on OpenStreetMap. We can see by default it's set to population density, and it's showing us a little legend there telling us what the colors mean. So green is least lowest population density, red is highest population density. Let's switch now to one that we're often very interested in checking first and foremost, which is the level of building completeness. When I click on that, we get quite a different picture of this region. So the scale is quite similar to the scale we saw before, the color scale. What we're now seeing is green, the greenest areas for where there are buildings, where there are predicted to be buildings, and they are complete. So that's why we've got this kind of two-dimensional legend now, because along one axis it's saying how complete are the buildings on OpenStreetMap, and then on the other axis it's how densely populated is that area. So the darkest green portions are very highly densely populated and very well mapped, where the buildings are very well mapped on OpenStreetMap. So just taking that, we can see that this kind of eastern region of the affected area is very well mapped. And another great feature of Disaster Ninja is that we can kind of see why it's very well mapped, because there's been loads of tasking manager projects in the past there. Those tasking manager projects, we can see the project numbers for each of them, and we can see little hot logos for them. You can also see their extents. That's not so clear, but this gray outline here for this rectangular shape, that's actually an extent of a tasking manager project. And we've got other tasking manager extents here, which are quite complex extents, because they are lots of polygons. These tasking manager projects are lots and lots of polygons. And that's likely because they were set up as projects which use MapSwipe and which focus those projects on built-up areas. So we can see at a glance, like there's been lots of tasking manager projects already in this eastern portion. In the western portion, there haven't been that many. There's been one here, and that's why this area is quite green, and another tiny project over here, and that's why this area is pretty green as well. So let's just now focus in on a particular area. Okay. So as we're zooming in here, we're seeing that we've got lots of red hexagons here, which is saying these areas are densely populated, predicted to be densely populated, and they are not well mapped in terms of buildings on OpenStreetMap. Okay, that's what this this legend's telling us. Bottom right, densely populated and not well mapped for buildings. Okay, as you zoom in, those hexagons, it may take a second, but those hexagons are going to refine. They're going to keep refining down until you get to the kind of the most granular zoom level. And I think that the smallest size these are is 1 kilometer across, right? 1 kilometer across each of these hexagons. It doesn't get more granular than that. But that's pretty granular for the kind of scales we're looking at. Now, you can change the backdrop to other sources. So you can change the backdrop here to like the OpenStreetMap backdrop. And this can start being useful, right? Here, I can already see the settlement and the roads around it, and whether or not there are buildings here. So this hexagon is predicted to, and you can click on it and it will tell you. This hexagon is predicted to have a zero building completeness, but then predicted to have a population of about 1,000. So that's why it's red, because it's kind of relatively high population density, but 0 buildings. This hexagon here, I can click on it. You can actually see quite a few buildings. And it's picking that up, right? It's saying that this hexagon is 0.44 building completeness. So it's about 44% mapped with a population of about 5,000. So you can get into that more granular detail like that. Now this region I'm interested in, it's red, like there's no buildings mapped, but it's predicted to have quite a high population. This is as granular as you can get with Disaster Ninja, but if you really want to test this and you want to find out more information, it's always good to check this directly in OpenStreetMap with a visual check. Okay, and you can do that directly from here. If you've got JOSM open, which I've got open already, you'll see at the top here there's a toolbar, and one of the options in the toolbar here is to edit the map in JOSM in OpenStreetMap. Okay, so if I click that, that's going to open up a new tab, and it just takes me to an edit view for OpenStreetMap. It's taking me actually to the ID editor. Now you could just have a look in ID editor if you don't have JOSM, but if you do have JOSM, it's a bit easier to do things. So you can select this next to the edit button in the top left-hand corner here. You can select the drop down and select edit with remote control. Equally, if you just want to do a visual check directly here, you can do that in ID. But I'm going to do it in JOSM, so I'm going to select edit with remote control to JOSM. And that's just going to open this view up directly in JOSM. JOSM's probably better because it's easier to just quickly switch between imagery and add other imagery sources. So I'm going to add Mapbox imagery, which is actually all right for this region. And I'm going to start zooming in. So I can see now I've got the OpenStreetMap data. There's some roads. There's a settlement outline here, but that's pretty much it. None of these buildings are mapped. And there's hundreds of buildings, at least for this settlement. And I could look elsewhere as well and try and download the data. And I can see along the coast as well, up and down the coast, there are buildings right on the coast, and they're not mapped on OpenStreetMap. Right? I could also just load the OpenStreetMap Carto layer for a comparison as well. And then I'm just enabling and disabling that by clicking the eye icon in JOSM against the layer. And I can see that there's almost no data here. So in this instance, like Disaster Ninja's getting it pretty right here, right? These red portions are really red, that the buildings are not well mapped here. What about roads? So another great useful layer in Contour is the OpenStreetMap road completeness. So I'm back in Contour now, back in my web browser. I can choose OpenStreetMap road completeness. And now it's going to give me a bit of a different picture, right? This settlement before Itampolo, the buildings were not well mapped there. But when I switch to roads, I can see actually the roads are quite well mapped. So it's the same color scale. Dark green means there's predicted to be a high density of roads here. And it means that they are well mapped as well. Dark red means there's predicted to be a high density of roads here, right, in this settlement, near it, but they're not mapped on OpenStreetMap or not well mapped on OpenStreetMap. And so jump back to JOSM again to check that, right? Well, there are some roads mapped in this settlement, this southern settlement, this one here, which is red. But there are some that are not. Now, Disaster Ninja is automatically reading the satellite imagery. It's automated. So it's going to be looking at features like this. It's going to be looking at linear features like this, these paths and tracks, and looking at the OpenStreetMap data and saying how well mapped it is. It's not always going to get things absolutely right. So it may think sometimes that the edges of fields or very minor tracks are unmapped roads. Okay, so that's why it's always good to visually check things as well. And so here it might be getting quite a high reading, for example, here, of a lack of road completeness. But actually what you're getting here is like you're getting quite a lot of you're getting quite a lot of very braided roads, very braided tracks, where maybe a track was passing through an area that became flooded during a particular season, and then like there are kind of alternate routes right next to it around it. Usually you would map that in OpenStreetMap as just a quite a simple single highway, probably be an unclassified or a path depending on its width. But you wouldn't be mapping all of these tiny single like complex braids. It would be overly complex. Now, Disaster Ninja doesn't necessarily know that, so it might be sometimes getting a slightly higher reading of incomplete for areas like this. That's why it's always really good to check, right? Visually check. But actually, it's getting this roughly right. Like there are quite a few probably fairly important routes that are not mapped, highways that are not mapped. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Like this one probably should be an unclassified highway, but this one has a branch going off here to this small settlement, and it's not mapped, right? This probably should be mapped. So it's kind of coming in use here, a little bit helpful. Now, like doing this visual checking, what I'm doing now, flipping between OpenStreetMap and checking completeness, very time consuming. And you can only really do this like for a small area, or if you're doing it for a large area, you might do a couple spot checks, right? If I was interested in a wider area, I might also download the data in another region and do another little spot check. That's time consuming. And that's where a tool like Disaster Ninja is really helpful, because when we're looking at like project scale, right, we're thinking about maybe this whole region, the southern region that intersects the most affected area of this cyclone. We need to look at the wide area, and that's where using a tool like Disaster Ninja is really useful. So it might allow me to say, you know what, we don't really need a project. Let's switch to buildings again. Maybe we don't need projects covering this western area because it's very well mapped in terms of completeness for buildings. But maybe we do need some projects, new projects in this western area, and then we can avoid projects in this eastern area. So it allows you really to focus in from a wide area and prioritize your project creation. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because we've got people from Contra on the call. We've got lots on the call, and probably people have questions. That's it for the sort of demo portion. Yeah, open up with questions. Please feel free to.
Sam,
Yeah.
Is there a quick way of seeing how old the data is that was mapped? It may have been 5 or 6 years ago and might be out of date, although it does show that it has all been mapped. Is that up-to-date information or old information?
Yeah, great question. So there is a Contour OpenStreetMap antiquity layer. And that, so just below the building and road layers, there's an antiquity layer. And so you can activate that. So this, again, it's on it's got two inputs here. It's got map views against OpenStreetMap last edit. So if you're getting sort of if you're getting very old data, it's going to be in this kind of this yellow and red area. So yeah, that antiquity layer can be worth having a look at as well. Yeah. So with these greener portions, you're getting more up-to-date data. And then with the red and yellow portions, you're getting quite old data. Yeah. Any other questions? Feel free to just come off mute directly or post in the chat as well. very quickly, just to show you, if you're interested in other areas apart from the disaster areas, you can also upload geometries here. So if you've got a GeoJSON, you can just upload it directly. So you can, for example, I've got a GeoJSON that I was using before for Hyundai as well. It's this wider blue one, and I just uploaded that directly. So you can also look at that. Yeah, so that's another way. You can also select administrative boundaries directly using the tool. Yeah, if you select the select admin boundary tool and then click anywhere, it's going to give you a list of administrative boundaries by scale. So one's for Madagascar, one of them sort of province, one of them's for the smaller region, and I can view just in that region. And it does actually give you summary data for that region as well in the top left after a few moments. So it's going to tell me like the level of completeness for that area, the estimated population, and so on and so forth. And this actually might be useful for Wilson, who's just done a size up for this area and has been told of a priority region, so could use that kind of thing. Yeah, here we go. It's telling me estimated population, and then estimated level of completeness. So percent with no OpenStreetMap objects in the populated areas. Yeah, so pretty useful. It's saying that populated area percent with no OpenStreetMap buildings of the populated area is about 90%. So this is like this is saying that the level of completeness of buildings in this whole area is very, very low actually. Coming right to the end there, I do have to drop right on the hour, unfortunately. Any final quick questions that I could address in a minute? Okay. Huge thanks
to very much, Sam. That was really helpful and gives us a lot of insight into some of the processes involved in selecting a project.
Great. Yeah, thanks very much. Really impressed to see the attendance on this call, a last minute call. So thanks all, and thanks to the Contour attendees as well. And thanks to your tools that make this all possible. So thank you. Huge thanks. Speak soon, everyone.